Welcome to Writer Syndrome, podcast about writing from start to finish. This episode's topic, getting into the cover art process. I'm Russ Cabasso, and joining me as always is Tim Letney. Tim, how are you? And have you thought at all about what your cover might look like, if you had any control over it?
Yeah, I have had broad ideas. There's one kind of scene in particular in my book that it's like an anticipatory scene, like a transitional scene.
Yeah.
Where there's like graffiti on a wall, like around a door. And it's like graffiti of like a mouth, like 1970s graffiti of a mouth over like a red door.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, wouldn't that be a neat cover? But I don't know if anybody would buy that. Maybe they'd think it was some kind of a cookbook.
Cookbook of terror.
Yeah.
This is another step of the process, and I had done a ton of research on this because of self-publishing. You've got to do it all, and you have control over all the aspects here. I did a little digging on what to expect if you go the traditionally published route. I think if you're a first-time author, sometimes the publisher might take a little more control over like even the title and the cover art. But I think it varies between larger, medium, different size publishers and how involved the author gets into it. I'm sure if you're someone bigger, you've got some clout, you can, I'm sure even at the starting, you can offer some suggestions. But for the most part, I think they all have their own art departments and groups that they'll outsource it to, right? So
it's kind of great because, not that I'm definitely going to get published, but I'm definitely going to query.
Yeah.
And I don't want to think about the cover at all. It's
I
not part of, I think it's because I've seen so many book covers over the years of varying degrees of quality.
Yeah. Yeah.
Some don't set up the expectation of what the book's going to be at all.
Yep.
And some oversell. I don't know. So I think it's a really delicate balance. How'd you approach it, Russ? Because you had a vision of what you wanted pretty early, right?
I am a very visual person, so I enjoy this thing. I live this part of the process too. I'm not an artist, sketching artist or whatever like that. So I had my cousin actually, she did all the artwork for me. Yeah, I had a pretty early on thought of what I wanted it to look like, and so my cousin, Casey Regan, you can go to caseyregan.com. She's a designer. She works at Nickelodeon right now. She's like, yeah, I'll help you out. I was like, cool. I was like, so I put together like this, what they call like a lookbook, right? And it's just, I had like a color palette in mind. I'm really into like minimalist design. I like things to be simple. So I was going in with that. I had, color scheme I had in mind, and just general sense of just keeping it simple. There's a picture of a satellite with some kind of mysterious, feel to it. So I put that all into this lookbook. I gave her even like the playlist of music I was listening to when I wrote it. I gave her like synopsis, some major characters, who they were, and a bunch of other, kind of a like Pinterest board of like design stuff that I liked. I put this all together for her, sent her, and she's like, oh, this is awesome. This is really helpful. And then she just came up with like, I think it was like 10 or 11 different concepts, and we kind of narrowed it down. And I showed people, got some feedback from everyone, getting a sense of like, what would you think this story is? I think even for my beta readers, when I sent out to beta readers, I sent them like the cover art and then in the book. I was like, once you read the book, what is the cover art? What do you think the themes or the book is about based on the cover before you start reading it, and then afterwards? So it's kind of part of like that feedback process. But
as one of those beta readers, it was really nice to see different iterations of that cover, and to kind of like give feedback about what one. Honestly, they all looked great. She's so talented that it was really kind of hard to choose. Yeah. But I think the one that you landed on is awesome. It's like a really strong cover.
Yeah, no. So far, all the feedback I've gotten from people, and it's funny. I was at a local brewery the other day, and I showed like a bunch of people are all interested, and they were like, "Holy smokes, this looks awesome!" And I was like, "Oh, thanks." I didn't do it, but so it's just exciting to get that feedback. But
it's one of those book covers that I would like put on a wall in a frame.
Yeah,
which they're not all. Like we talk about it all the time, how sometimes it's just a silhouette of a guy with a gun running down an alleyway or something.
With like a drone or a helicopter over their head or something like that. And it's just like, so that was the other thing too, is like, we've talked about this in the genre expectations episode, and that's something I'm cautious of, but I was also like, you know what? I want to do something a little bit different. I think I can still, because it's not like it's a thriller, and there's a little sci-fi, I guess, in there, But I like the idea of just having something that one kind of stood out, I think, from the crowd a bit. but also still kind of still conveys the mystery of it. Like that's the whole point, right? It's a mystery that, you know, characters trying to solve. And like, I think the cover really kind of portrays that. There's a little
and it matters, right? Like I think yours stands out, but it doesn't stand out like in a bad way. You know, as we've kind of dipped into this world of self-published authors, I think sometimes they either get their friends or they do the covers themselves. Yeah. And they're using fonts that just aren't used.
Yeah.
You know, they're using maybe like kind of AI touched up images, you know.
Yeah.
And
it just doesn't look good.
Even if the book quality, even if the writing is phenomenal.
Yeah.
I mean, you can't guarantee that somebody's going to want to open that cover or, you know, scroll to get to the words if you're not doing your book right if you're not investing, I think, in the cover in the self-published world. Like you need to be very deliberate about it because we talk about first impressions all the time. I mean, it's the first impression.
Yeah.
Like that and the title.
People judge a book by its cover, right?
What? So, never heard that before.
No, I think you're supposed to. I think you're supposed to not judge a book by its cover, but I think you actually do judge a book by its cover,
unless you're a book.
Unless you're a book. That's definitely. It was the other thing too, is making sure that it looked professional. Because again, a self-published route, like I need every step of this to feel professional. It needs to feel like it's coming from some big publishing house in a way, you know. And I think I pulled that off. I mean, I have a professional artist doing the work, and the cover looks great, and I'm super happy with it. And I don't think it looks, you know, cheesy at all, you know.
Yeah.
I think if you're on the route of self-publishing, definitely invest in finding a professional artist, some shape.
I think it's worth investing. Yeah.
Because there are tools you can go, you know, you can use like Canva or BookBrush and stuff like this, but you got to be careful too, because like, you know, you have to worry about licensing issues with like images and stuff like this. And it's like,
you know, I'll tell you, and I deal with it at work, like in my professional job all the time. Everybody thinks they can design, and they can to some extent, but there's a really big gulf between a professional designer and, you know, a Canva designer.
Yeah.
And it's no offense. It's just there's certain spacing and leading and what fonts you're using. And like they're educated in this. And for a reason, it's a professional career. And yes, the tools have become more accessible where everybody can try their hand at it, but there's still just so much expertise in that area. Like, unfortunately, not everybody is a designer.
No. But some of the other things I did when going down this path was like, one, obviously looking at covers of books in my genre and finding ones that I liked. I was really into like the Dune reissued covers, where it's like just this really super simple, you know, just character in a desert and it just says Dune on it. Obviously the book sells itself already, so the cover doesn't need to do that, but it just looks really, really nice. I don't know if that was the original art design, but using, you know, finding covers you already like, and then definitely looking into like what genre you're writing for. I just feel like the thriller genre, like I know it's there for a purpose and there's certain elements you should include, but man, I don't want to see another silhouetted guy on a running down the tarmac, you know, like I don't want to see that again.
I mean, they must sell, right? I mean, I'm sure they've got their silhouetted man template.
Yeah.
And they're like, that's a beach read. You know, you pick it up at the airport.
Right.
You know what you're going to get. You're going to get a guy running with a gun.
Yeah. And I think pulling all that together.
Yours would be a guy running with a Coca-Cola.
Yeah. That'd be my memoir.
So I think for a memoir, that'd be a wonderful cover. Like what are you
running with a can of Coke and like a beard,
silhouetted.
If you're self-publishing and you have total control over the cover, you know, thinking about the themes too, and I kind of touched on it earlier, like that was one thing I wanted the cover to kind of convey this bit of mystery. Like I also have a little Easter egg in my cover design. If you pay close attention, there's something in there, which I think is fun because that's like part of the story. Like should kind of sum up what the vibe and the feeling of the story is. So putting definitely a little effort into like thinking about the themes that are there, and then what aspects that are in the story you can play up, you know, for the cover. So I think that's just fun stuff. It was funny because I think the first couple iterations of it, I was just thinking of the front cover, and then I had read some article about like the whole book, like the whole front to back should be your canvas, you know, and making that art kind of expand across. And I was like, oh, that's kind of I like that, you know. So if you opened up the whole thing, you would see like this big picture. But yeah, it was definitely one of the early on things I had thought about, just because it helps. It's also fun to think about it and put that lookbook together and take a break from writing between revisions. And like, it kind of gives you like a new sense of like excitement about the book and the story.
Yeah, that's cool.
Some of the things, like getting into like the nitty gritty, that's kind of more conceptual stuff. And obviously work with someone who's a professional. But like in getting the nitty gritty stuff, it's interesting. So I'm using KDP, right, which is Kindle, it's Amazon's self-publishing tool, and I'm using Ingram Spark. This took a lot of back and forth between me and my designer, my cousin there, and like getting the sizes right, like learning about paper type and quality and the different color and like the trim size and like what size do I want the book to be, you know. Hardcover, like the jacket, then like when you pull the jacket off, what's on the inside. And I was like, oh man, I haven't really thought about this stuff, you know, making sure I had my ISBNs ahead of time. So like Ingram Spark and KDP, they both offer templates you can download. So based on like the size of the book, 6x9 or 5x8 or whatever. But you need your ISBN so it can print up the barcode for you. And you have to leave space for that on the back cover, you know. But then it was like, oh, we found these templates that they have. It's like, okay, I just punch in the ISBN and it, you know, some key things, page count, and then it gives you a template, like an InDesign template. And I just sent that to her. And she's like, oh, this is actually really easy. This makes this very easy for me to just move the images around and stuff. But it took a while for me to like put all that together. And it's funny, as many of these websites as I've read, it's like I couldn't, nothing, it just didn't click until I actually went through the process and made some of the errors. I was like, okay, now I get what I have to do. This isn't hard at all. And also like for the hardcover, making sure there's space for like the author bio and like, you know, headshot and all that sort of stuff. So obviously having like an ebook format, which is just the front cover. And the nice thing is, you know, these are all print on demand. So it's not too concerning when you can go in, you upload your images, and then you can order some proofs to take a look at them and make sure they're good, which I am doing tomorrow.
And you had to take in consideration, right, the font size based on the preview of how it appeared on Amazon?
So I went on Amazon, I did like a Google search. I did a search for, you know, thrillers, whatever, right? Their top 10 list thrillers. And you know how they do on Amazon, they've got like all the books, you know, the covers all listed out. And I went through this practice of taking the cover that I had and, you know, shrinking it down and then putting it like as if it was a cover on, like if it was a book on an Amazon listing. And I was like, oh man, it doesn't stand out. It was like the design early on was like a little washed out, and I was like, okay, how do I fix that? So I talked to my cousin, and then we were like kind of going back for some ideas. And actually another friend of ours, who's also in the design community, she took a look at it, and she actually did this awesome like kind of breakdown and research for the cover. And she's like, oh, here's some tips I think that would help like make it stand out a bit more. Thanks, Laura. And I was like, oh, this is great. So I went back to my cousin, the designer, and I was like, hey, I think we need to make these changes. Let's make the title a little bit bigger, my name a little bit bigger in the bottom. I think the title needs to be bigger. I think it needs to be filled in too, so it stands out, so it really pops on the listing pages. So that was definitely something to consider. Definitely changed the direction of what the cover looked like. So,
I mean, super smart of you to run that test, right? Something that I wouldn't have anticipated. Like, what does this cover look like shrunk down next to other covers online, right? Because you're always picturing it, I'm guessing, full size when somebody's got it in their hand, or maybe somebody clicks on that, like, look inside.
Yeah.
But seeing what it's going to look like when it's a postage stamp or something.
Like a thumbnail, you know, against like a bunch of other ones that are all in the same category. So, but I think with the changes it made, I think it's going to help quite a bit. And it's interesting because like thinking, you have to think about all the different shelves that your book's going to be sitting on, right? Whether it be digital or physical, where these thumbnails going to be. So like going on to like even Goodreads and Amazon, like just looking at what the other covers will look like and how they're laid out definitely will play a part in like, you know, overall design. I feel pretty confident about my book. Like if it was sitting on a bookshelf somewhere or stacked somewhere, like the color scheme and the minimalism of it, I think would stand out amongst everything else. I feel like a lot of book covers these days are like beer cans, where like they're so confusing. Like the art's beautiful, but like, what is the damn book about? What is the beer? What am I drinking? What is this? You know, I was in the library the other day, and I always go to like the discard section, the ones they're trying to sell for like a nickel or $1 a piece. Yeah, it is really hard to like look at 100 books together. Everything's so disparate and like so oddly shaped and differently. Like it's just it's a mess. And obviously it's not very artful, but I'm like, I wish there was some kind of uniformity to this. Like, so I didn't have to like tilt my head sideways and, take the book out. And I'm telling you, I don't love book covers. It's weird. I like love movie posters. Yeah.
but book covers themselves, it's pretty hard to find one that hits for me.
Yeah.
You know, and I think you're right to lean into that kind of minimalism, because those are the ones that feel kind of classy and kind of mysterious.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it just feels like, I don't know.
Like it just looks like a complete mess. I mean, I literally, when I did this, when I was doing this research into thrillers on Amazon, I was just like, they're all the same book. I think they're all this. I think they're all the same book, and probably they are, you know, in some shape or form. But yeah, I was just like, okay, maybe I could do something a little different here. I don't know. And it also just, I can think it fit what I wanted to have come across to the book. So I also don't have that character that is like the Jack Reacher or the, you know, the James Bond. I don't have the guy who's the silhouette, you know. There's not that one character, and I didn't want that, because that's not what it's about. So yeah, it's been a fun process, but definitely looking into like if you're using Ingram Spark or Amazon or like that, they all have like these template generator, like cover generators and calculators that can help you figure out the sizes you need based on your page count and everything else. But yeah, there's a lot to think about. And it was a whole other leg of learning and researching and looking at different paper qualities and like going to the books on my shelf and being like, well, okay, is this cream? Is this white 50, white 70? What is this? Wow. What's the paper weight? And like thinking about all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, and we talked about comps, you know, in our last episode. Did you have any book comps? Like, I'm sorry, book cover comps in mind is for your direction, or no? Were you going for more of a, because your cover feels, I don't know what it feels like to me. It almost feels like Asimov or something. It feels like, yeah, kind of retro futurism.
Yeah, no, that's yeah, you nailed it. It was honestly, it was Asimov and Dune, like those new covers. Like I went to the bookstore and I just I don't know if it's their new cover or whatever, but it's just very minimalist and it's got a similar style across the entire series.
The font on that cover is awesome.
Yeah,
on that Dune cover.
Yeah.
So
you know the
cool.
one I'm talking about, right? And it's and like I was just like, that's just a beautiful cover, and it just gets across everything you need. Again, of course, the book's been around since, you know, the 60s, so it's already established, so it can get away with doing that maybe. But and a lot of Asimov stuff is, especially like the reprint stuff, has like this really minimalism to it, like that retro futuristic minimalism, which I absolutely love. So if I had to say I had like cover art comps, it'd probably be like the Dune series and pretty much anything Asimov. So I also like very like the old you ever see those NASA posters where they do like their vacation posters for like various planets?
Oh yeah, I like those.
I love that stuff. So I'd probably say that's another inspiration. But that's been my journey. I think I've learned quite a bit through this process, and like already like the other 2 or 3 books I'm like toying around with. I already have ideas for cover art for them.
Yeah, it's interesting, man. I'll tell you, I feel like I just feel like I don't have room in my head to really even engage with the idea of it. Like, I'm not a designer at the end of the day. Like, I don't even know if I would trust my instinct with a cover.
No, I mean, you could at least, there's things you like, so you can at least pull those elements together. I wouldn't, like, I'm not designing this stuff myself, but I got a pretty good idea of like the vision of what I want it to be, you know, and just have someone else execute on that.
Yeah, the covers that hit when I was a kid, I always loved the Clive, like the old, like late 80s, early 90s Clive Barker covers, because they were kind of minimalist, but they kind of felt a little subversive and like, oh, maybe you shouldn't be reading this. That kind of like mystery to it.
Yeah.
But for contemporary stuff, at least in the horror genre, I feel like whoever Grady Hendrix uses for his cover design, it's the same thing. It's kind of minimalistic. Him and Paul Tremblay kind of rely on photography sometimes, but also like hand-drawn things that look great. They're minimalistic. That gets like the ethos or the vibe of the book across very simplistically, whether it's like a yearbook photo or you know, one chair or something.
Yeah.
It's kind of inspiring to hear you talk about the covers and also so foreign, because I'm like, but it's like I paint with words, so my brain can't work with anything visual right now.
It's a good way to like refill the well too. It gives you something to get excited about, and it gets your brain working in a different way. You know, like I said, I'm not an artist by any means, but like I like element wise, I know what I like and I know where things should go. I got a pretty good sense of that, but the actual execution of it, like I'm not going to trust myself to do that. But I got definitely a strong visual sense of like what I'm looking for and what I think would look good, and you give it a try, and then you could experiment. But Yeah, I enjoyed the creation process of it and working with my cousin. And she's been
awesome.
absolutely awesome. And she's learning too. And she's never done a book cover before, so she's like going through all the templates and like learning about like this, worrying about the spine size and all this other stuff. It was kind of like we're both trial and error, kind of figuring this out together. But
it's interesting how I'm obviously over the years cover art changes. You know, we all have our favorite books, and then you'll see new versions of those books with new covers.
Yeah,
I mean, it changes the whole vibe. I mean, you talk about the new Dune book. I'm sure it's a lot different than the first cover was. Asimov's gone through so many changes.
Yeah.
I don't know. It feels so temporary.
Yeah.
You know, it's like what people who know how to sell will do in the moment.
Yeah.
And then 10 years from now, that cover and those suggestions will be completely different because something else will be popular.
Yeah.
And I've seen it with King books over the years and Dean Koontz to a lesser extent. But yeah, it just feels very temporary in a way that movie covers don't. It's like they almost feel stationary and not too refreshed.
Yep.
But book covers themselves, you know, they every 5 or 10 years. I mean, geez, even reading Colson Whitehead's
Something One, Station One.
Zone One, which is amazing, but there's multiple covers to that book and they're all bad, really.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure there's somebody somewhere loves those covers, but they're very different. You know, there's one that's like bright orange. There's one that's kind of black and white, uses still photography.
Yeah.
But the vibe of those covers is like nothing about those covers, any of them would have made me pick that up off of the shelf, except for his name. And I think that's another thing. If you're an established name, you don't need to lean too hard into what it looks like. I was thinking about like Chuck Hogan and Del Toro's The Strain. Their cover, at least before the TV series was out, was just their names.
I was just going to say.
And the book title. Because that's all you need.
Like Tom Clancy and Dean Koontz, it's just like Koontz.
Same with King, right? You just see King and it doesn't really matter.
It doesn't matter, right? The title of the book could be like the next book you're going to read anyway, so just pick it up.
You know, I'm looking over at my Texas Chainsaw Massacre poster right now. And it's got a wonderful tagline. Yeah. Do book covers ever have, I guess tagline's wrong, slogan?
Some do.
Do book covers ever have slogans?
I think for the most part, no, but I have seen, you know, like you'll have the title and then there'll be like some sub kind of tagline or
I guess that's all for marketers, right? Like
maybe if it's part of a series or something, you'd probably see that pretty often, but yeah,
I can't think of any. But I mean, immediately for movies, I'm like Alien. No one can hear you scream in space. You know,
right.
Like that marketing kind of comes along with it.
Yeah.
Texas Chainsaws. Who will survive and what will be left of them? What a wonderful slogan.
It's pretty great. I mean, most of the times, the only thing you're going to see, like I'm looking at a couple like these, you know, thrillers here, and it's like, yeah, you know, no one was ever supposed to to be there, you know, stuff like that. It's like, okay, and
I guess it's kind of back cover stuff, right? Like,
yeah, I mean, some of them are like, it only takes one lie to destroy a marriage, you know, stuff like that. It's like the guilty husband, you know. So it's like I think you'll see some of that stuff. More often than not, you'll see more, you know, if you've got them, like the pull quotes, you know, from someone famous being like,
right,
this book I couldn't put it down, I had to throw it across the room, you know, New York Times.
Oh man, I threw a book across the room, but not because I was excited about it.
But yeah, some of them do. I think a lot of the thrillers lean into that. It feels like I'm trying to think of like sci-fi books that I've read. I don't think that I haven't seen many taglines like that, but thrillers I definitely have. You know him, you trust him until today. So, you know, stuff like that.
What would Dunes be? It'd be like an acid trip of ecology.
Fear is the mind killer.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. That's how I did this.
Cool, man. Well, hey, I love your cover. I can't wait for you to share it. I can't wait to buy multiple copies of your book.
I can't wait
and hold your cover in my hand.
I have to pay rent, so yeah, buy multiple copies, please.
Buy my book. Yes, I will.
Yeah. So I don't know. That's it. What do you been reading and watching lately? Anything?
I'm still finishing up. Actually, just like I am at it's sad. Probably the last 5 to 10 pages of Perfume, which I mentioned in the last cast.
Yeah.
It's still phenomenal. You know how we talk about act threes a lot and how sometimes when you're writing them, you kind of have a tendency to rush through them.
Yeah.
It feels like that with this book.
Really?
You know, things were kind of going at this nice measured pace.
Yeah.
And there's like the fun and games section where it was kind of ridiculous, but whatever, you know. And then the ending, it turns into like a broad overview synopsis. And I'm like, what's happening here? Like the narrator just popped out into Omniscient Third and is given like a historical overview of kind of what's happening in the like in that moment. And it's kind of crazy because what's happening boots on the ground is very thrilling and subversive and challenging. But the way that it's presented is so far removed from the emotion of it.
Interesting.
Which, kind of lines up with the character, but it's even divorced from that character. It's so far from like a limited third. So it was weird. I was like, I like the content of what's happening here.
Yeah.
But the presentation it's leaving me wanting to be closer to it and not so far away. And he wasn't hanging on scenes that feel like they deserve to be hung on. Like, there's this like object of the main character's affection, and he finally kind of attains this.
Yeah.
And it's completely glossed over.
Really?
Like completely glossed over. And it's really interesting.
Yeah. It's kind of wild because I know we've talked about that too. Like the third act, sometimes and there's a line between like, have you ramped up enough tension throughout and now like the third act is kind of like relieving of that and you're kind of like moving a clip for the climax and it's like the pacing ramps up because you want the reader to feel like, all right, we're moving here. But there's also a line of like, are you just rushing through it because you're done with this?
He's a really talented author, so I'm sure it's intentional, but it just feels like for like the majority of the book, he hangs on like perfume making processes and boiling and reductions and in so much detail, and then like infatuation and stalking, and it's so weird. And then it gets to like this precipice of where things are going to happen, and it just zooms out 1,000 feet. Yeah. And it just tells me broadly what happened. And it's like, are you giving me a synopsis of what you wanted to write? Or maybe you didn't want to, I don't know. I feel like I did that a lot through writing, where I was telling myself the story and finding the story. And now through subsequent edits, I've kind of had to choose where I want to zoom in and pull out. Yeah. And this just feels pulled out. But like I said, I'm sure it's intentional, but it did not meet my expectations, and it is not in line with the rest of the book's approach, which is really interesting. Yeah, if it stands out that much, then maybe it isn't on purpose. I don't know. Like it should be a natural kind of like ramping up, right? Yeah, there's like two parts that, it stands out for the wrong reason. Like there's the middle that stands out where the main character just isolates himself in a cave for years and just smells. He just lays there and smells. I'm like, okay, what's happening here? It's kind of an interesting, like, was this going to be the conclusion? Like, was this a short story at first? And was this the ending? And then that transitions into act 3 from there. And I'm like, okay, that's an interesting transition to act 3, for being in 5 to 10 pages of some dude just smelling. Yeah. And the reason why he like, whiffing. I don't know, it's kind of ridiculous. Like wakes up is because he can't smell himself. He's like, wait a minute, I can't smell myself. I'm having an existential crisis. I'm going to get back into society. I wish I couldn't smell myself anymore. Some days. And you know what? That's the great thing about Zoom. You have no smell to me, Russ. Yeah, it's great, isn't it? Yeah. But anyway, I really enjoyed that book. I think it's phenomenal. And then I'll probably get back into Broken Earth trilogy after this. Nice. Oh, it took me many, many watches, but I started Peaky Blinders, which I keep seeing pop up in misogynistic memes or whatever. And I'm like, ugh, is this worth watching? Everybody says it's so good. And I've got friends who talk about it all the time. So it's not great from my perspective. How many episodes are you into? I only watched the first one. And I was like, this feels like it's going to be a lot of work to get through this. So, dude, so like that first episode, which is maybe only 40 or 50 minutes, took me just this most recent time, 3 watches to get through. Not counting the time I tried to start it with Jill, my wife, before. But then, it does that kind of, once you see the moves and, the setups there, it feels kind of like a dumbed down Sopranos in a way, or maybe like Boardwalk Empire. Yep. Where like you start to see the play and the tension and, the sleeper agents and whatever's had like the structure of it. And it's like, oh, I could watch this. And there are only 6 episodes, so I'm 3 in. So it's like, well, I could finish this. Yeah. Okay. But that sounds like faint praise, and it is. It's just kind of so far mediocre content that I think for the time period it was released was like, oh my God, Netflix is doing original content.
Yeah.
So I'm not speaking wildly highly of it. Cillian Murphy is fine. I think maybe having Oppenheimer in the back of my brain has kind of got him on my mind again.
Yeah, and Tom Hardy pops up in there too. I'm a Tom
Hardy's in there?
Yeah, he pops up.
Yeah,
I like Tom Hardy. Anya Taylor-Joy, she's in there too.
Anna Taylor? Yeah. So maybe like as
Sam Neill
it goes on.
Right? Sam Neill, he's in it for I don't know how long, but
he's in it so far. He feels like very paint by the numbers, his character. There's no nuance yet to him. He's just kind of a foil.
Yeah.
So but anyway, I'll let you know how it goes. How about you? What do you reading? What are you watching?
Well, actually quite a bit lately. I finished that Warrior's Apprentice last episode. I was talking about that one. It was a lot of fun, sci-fi space opera thing written by Lois McMaster-Bujold. I think she wrote it back in the 80s. It was fun. I started this book, Children of Time, by Adrian Tchaikovsky, I think his name is. Sci-fi guy.
It sounds like a Bee Gees song.
Yeah, right? Children of Time.
I think it's Children of the World, and I've got it in my book somewhere.
So far, I'm enjoying that. It's just getting going. I just started it. And it's part of like one of like, of course, a series of books. I read Snapshot by Brandon Sanderson. It's like a novella. It's only like 80 or 90 pages or something.
I was gonna say, you're blowing through books, man.
Yeah, it was a fun read. Sci-fi crime. So kind of a little out of, I mean, he does write sci-fi and fantasy, but it was a fun read. And then for watching, oh boy. So I rewatched Dune, the first part, because I watched the new trailer and I got all excited for part 2. So I was like, oh,
the David Lynch one?
Yeah, yes. You know how I Dune. I rewatched that, and man, that movie is just so awesome.
It's good.
It's so good. Just like the pacing for a movie that's like 2 hours and like 30 minutes or whatever. Like I was like, man, this is just moving along at such a nice pace of like, and the way they did give you all this information, it does not like overly expositions, and they,
he's the perfect director for that property.
It's so good. So watch that. I watched this series, The Night Agent, on Netflix, which was actually pretty good. It's a thriller. FBI.
I could tell The Night Agent.
Yeah, FBI Secret Service. I could picture
the cover. Is it a silhouette of a man running?
Yeah, pretty much. It's just got like the Secret Service. It's like at the White House and stuff like this. Matthew Quirk, I guess he's writing these kind of thrillers. But it was a fun show. It gets pretty complicated with its threads, but
so there is a cover that just does have a silhouette of a man looking at the Washington Monument.
Yep. Come on, guys. We gotta mix this stuff up a little bit here. Come on.
I mean, to lean into that a little bit, I'm sure, right? Just like for years in video games when they didn't talk or you couldn't see their faces, I'm sure that the idea is that it becomes the everyman and that you can picture yourself in this heroic fantasy, this power fantasy of being this all-star Jack Reacher-y type person.
Yeah.
But it still feels a little rote to me, a little childish.
It's just so goofy. Like all these covers do the same thing, and it's like, hey, I guess if that works for you, that's the thing. I guess that's the thing. So I don't know. But yeah, I watched that show. That was good. It was good. And then I watched the new Indiana Jones Dials of Destiny's Child.
Oh, and how is the Dials of Destiny's Child?
Okay, so let's go. Let's work with benchmarks here. It is much better than Kingdom of Crystal Skull. Really? Yes.
What if you cut out Act 3 of Crystal Skull?
I think it's still better. Now
you're saying James Mangold is better than Steven Spielberg.
Yeah, I mean, if you're gonna extrapolate that, then sure, maybe I am. Definitely, it was fun. But again, just like Crystal Skull, whatever that stupid movie was called, the third act just gets silly. It's just like, this is silly. What are we doing? Why? Yeah. We don't, come on. But then you look back at, like, you think of, Temple of Doom, you think of, Last Crusade, and like those were kind of silly too, but not, I don't know. It's just weird. It's weird how they're a little more placed in. Maybe it's the CGI. Maybe that's what it is. Maybe it's the CGI, like overuse, use of that, where it's like back then, it's like, yeah, there was some special effects, but it felt a little more baked into the real world,
I feel like, and I'm kind of surprised they didn't do this, especially because it's Mangold, who seems to use CG sparingly in some of his work, except for the Wolverine, where it's everywhere. Yeah. But thinking about things that have been hitting lately, I mean, specifically thinking about like Cruise's most recent spat of like CG light movies like Top Gun or The Mission Impossible, where there is some spectacle.
Yeah. Yep.
You'd think they would have leaned into that. Like, yeah, use a stunt guy, maybe like plaster Harrison Ford's face onto a stunt guy, but have the stunts be real to make the stakes feel like concrete.
Yep.
Because I think that's why people are going to see those Cruise movies. It's because it's not this overly reliance on Fast and the Furious CG. It's like, oh, there's something about the scale of what's happening.
That's
that
Tom Cruise getting thrown off the building. It's him actually jumping. So it's like I think like. Yeah, it just got a little silly, and I was surprised.
You got to throw Harrison Ford off of a building.
I know, and then we'd be all set. He's 80 years old. Just throw him off a building. So then, and this isn't a spoiler because I mean it's in the trailer, but so they do like a bunch of de-aging stuff, which actually looked really good. But you can obviously you can see it, and you're like, oh yeah, there's something a little.
How they do I still feel like they haven't conquered the eyes yet. How are the eyes?
The eyes were actually really good, it was good. The thing that stood out though was like, but that's Harrison Ford's 80-year-old voice.
That's what I heard. I heard the voice was still old.
So it's like, you're like, what are you doing? Come on. That is probably the easiest thing to fix. Like the de-age of voice, like run through some AI thing you got.
I wonder why they didn't do that.
Yeah. And it's like, wow, this is standing out. Like it stood out. But I mean, it's a long opening sequence and it's great. It's a lot of fun, that
reminds me of? It reminds me of when they de-aged, and they are doing it now in that Secret Invasion show. But when they de-aged Sam Jackson and Captain Marvel, and it looks pretty good. And then they have him run, and he runs like a 70-year-old man.
It was like watching The Irishman and watching like Robert De Niro beat up someone. Like, and I was like, wait a second, that's an 80-year-old man kick. So that's not that's not a 30-year-old, 40-year-old man's kick.
I've noticed that Sam Jackson's arch nemesis these days is concrete stairs. It's a really hard time walking up steps.
Oh my God. The steps are what foiled him.
You got to de-age his legs a little bit.
Get all these mother effing steps out of my mother effing way. That's the secret invasion. We're being secretly invaded by steps everywhere. Yeah, so that was the third act got a little silly, but it wasn't. I guess it wasn't as bad as Aliens. At the end of the movie in Crystal Skull.
Oh, sure.
And Crystal Skull just
theme-wise that it was a little heavier and not as lighthearted as the previous Indiana Jones. Is that true?
Yeah, I mean, it definitely was, and like. I'll say, like Harrison Ford, it seemed like he actually showed up to work, and it was great, Yeah, awesome. And he was into it, and it was a good all right, end of this character. It's time for him to move on.
How was the Millennium Falcon? How was she?
Phoebe Waller-Bridge.
Oh, she's the computer in the Millennium Falcon.
Yes, right? Yes. She was great. Actually, she was great. She brought.
I like her a lot.
Yeah, I do too. She brought a. Kind of levity to the whole situation, and you could see what they did.
Was she like her Fleabag character, or was she a different?
Yeah, she kept looking at the screen and giving us winks and nods, being like, "I don't think this old man can do this." No. She was good. She was her own character with her own flaws and weaknesses, and definitely stood out. And
are they franchising her? Is that the point?
I don't know. I don't know if that's the plan. I don't think it is, but I guess they could, but it wouldn't be under the Indiana Jones banner. I mean, I think they'd want to, but obviously Indiana Jones is not coming back. I think this is it.
She wasn't like, my name's not Ray. My name's Indiana Jones. I'm the last Skywalker.
God, no, thank God they did not do that. But yeah, and you had some good, the villains were great. Mads Mikkelsen in there, Boyd Holbrook, who I guess Mangold must be a big fan of because he was in.
How was Mads?
Mads was great. I mean, Mads Mikkelsen as a villain is, come on, like that's great. All right, I mean that's our episode. I think we're done. We're done here. That's it.
Share your cover. I want to see it again.
Yeah,
I'm gonna get a tattoo of your cover.
Nice. Put it on your back, your forehead.
Put it around my chest.
Yeah, so that's our episode. I think if you enjoyed it, share it with some people. Follow us on Instagram at Writer Syndrome Books. We're still on the Twitter there at Writer_Syndrome. We'll also be on.
We're there. Threads. We're joining Threads, baby.
I think we are.
Oh, that's all right.
All right. Probably also be there as Writer Syndrome Books. And listen to wherever we are. We might be on YouTube soon, but. We'll see.
What about Blue Sky? We're going to get on Blue Sky? You get that
Mastodon, Blue Sky, all of them.
Mastodon's really difficult to navigate.
We're going back to MySpace.
Oh, I'm there. I still got Tom as my only friend.
Oh, so sad. But yeah, that's it. So next episode, what are we doing?
Are we doing like your book is launched?
I think we are doing my book is launched.
We're gonna break out the bubbly.
Yeah, we're gonna have champagne at 10 a.m.
Maybe we should do an evening recording.
Yeah, it'll be a short one. I'll be like, my book's out. Go buy it.
Love it.
That's it. So I guess until next time, just keep writing away.
But don't keep designing your cover. Hire somebody to do it.
Safety tip of the day.